order to give my Etsy shop its proper send-off, I want to tell you the story of why I started it, I want to tell you why I'm shutting it down, and I want to hopefully give the next crop of people starting their own little art businesses some advice that I wish I'd had, and that had I had them, maybe I wouldn't be shutting this down now. To start off telling this story, unfortunately, we have to go back to the time of quarantine. In order to tell this story, I have to take you back to 2020 quarantine. And like everyone else, I was stuck in my room. We all had to find our ways to cope with the situation, and since, like a lot of people, I suddenly had a lot more time in my hands, I decided to put that time into making more art. Making and writing and doing things has always been a pretty effective coping mechanism for me, and that's the way I decided to deal with it. Distract myself from everything going on. At this time, I had been freelancing for a while. I was on a pretty long-term contract at that moment, and I was definitely very much in the groove of that job and looking to just play around, try something new, get creative, and, see if I could build something. The spark of this whole Etsy project for me was really just like, can I do it? Will it work? Like, let's see what people think. So much of my creative experience as a designer has been very heavily involved with larger teams, and while that stuff is really great and I've learned so much, the reason I'm any good at anything is purely because I've had great mentors and really great creative directors and bosses that have taught me so much over the years. There was another side to that where, you can get tired of trying to fight for your work so much. Sometimes when you're working in a design agency, you have, some kind of crazy idea that you're like, this is really cool. I know this will work. I just want to try it. And, the creative director or the client or whoever it is, they just they're not ready for it. And they just don't do it. They just don't do it. And you're like, dang, I just really wish I could have tested this and seen if anyone liked it. You just want to find out, if the idea you think is really cool and exciting is actually cool and exciting. It's not just you. And this comes back into play because that's really, that was my whole approach with trying to start this Etsy shop in quarantine. I had this extra time. I just wanted to see, can I build something completely on my own and will people like it? That's really all there was to it. And the first thing that I worked on for several months, I don't remember how fast I came up with the idea. I don't think that actually took me too long, but it took me a really long time to get the design actually good enough to be produced. And what I came up with was my baby that started it all. Is this patch right here. It really is the reason that my entire Etsy shop worked at all, to be honest. I had a combination of a good idea and good execution, and I guess I probably got lucky on timing as well. And, this was a good product. At least, I can say that now objectively because it did sell well, at least relatively well, as far as Etsy standards go. I decided to sink about $200 into this project, and I used that to get the first run of patches produced. So I made 100 patches for $200, and then I, put them up on Etsy to see if anyone would like them. There's a couple things that kind of helped me get this little guy off the ground when I got started is the fact that, I'm a designer and I have halfway decent photography skills and photo editing skills, things like that. And, I have a sense of presentation, all those things. And I tried to use that to the best of my ability when I launched my little store that had literally, one item in it. And in the process of launching my store, I named it, and came up with this little logo for it. These are my little stickers that I then used for all the packaging and things like that later on. After this first idea, I kind of wanted to make just a fun, artistic little shop where I could play around with my outdoorsy interests, try to make funny things, try to work on my illustration skills. It was just really a little sandbox for me to play in and see what I could make, see if people would like it. And, you know, if people bought it and enjoyed it, like, that was great. I, you know, started out with just the one product. I just had this patch, and that, you know, I don't think I made any sales for a while. I'm sure it was at least a month or two of no sales, which is not unusual. You know, it takes time for people to notice your listing. And there's just so many listings, especially under like popular search terms. So, you know, you're buried for ages. Like, it's pretty bad. And I can't remember exactly what I priced it at, but I think I might have priced it a little on the lower end. I think I priced it lower than I have it now because I wanted to get some traction, and I knew that that was going to be tough. And because so much of this wasn't about profit for me, it was just an experiment. You know, my income was coming from my clients and stuff like that. So, you know, I was able to do that. I was able to basically sell for, you know, very little profit at the beginning. And so I did that. And I think I would say it probably took about 6 months at least for me to start making any real consistent sales on that. Selling a patch that is only a couple dollars, you know, it's not like I was raking in any real money on this, but, you know, I was starting to get some positive feedback from people that had purchased from me. And that was really cool, just to see people excited, you know, see people say that they laughed because of something that I made and that they really loved giving it to a friend. Like, that just like was such a cool feeling. The patch started getting some traction, which also brought traction to my shop in general. And that was great. That was like super exciting. I wasn't really making any money at this point, but it spurred me on to make more things and just kind of explore and really push myself to see what else I can do and make, and how else can I kind of play around with this project. The other thing I kind of want to talk about is just like the hits and misses, you know? Like, as I said, this was a place to experiment. I think the experimentation was smart, but I don't think I went about it in a very smart way. And I'll also tell you just that, like, the way I decided to experiment was to come up with something and I would make it. I'm a print designer. I have a lot of experience making physical things, stuff like this, and, you know, stickers, all kinds of stuff. I've done a lot of like branded work for corporations, which is like part of how I built up that skill set. I knew how to make stuff, and I knew how to make stuff of pretty decent quality, so I would just do it. And I definitely regret that because in my process of just playing around and seeing what works, you know, I spent money on things that didn't really sell very well, and that I am kicking myself now. It's like I have boxes full of like stuff that, you know, didn't sell. It makes you feel kind of bad about yourself, or maybe other people don't feel this way. Every time I see the piles of stuff that didn't really sell that well, it's like, like, I wish I would have tested a smaller run, or I wish I would have like made a single, you know, made a prototype or something like that, and, you know, seen if it would do well online first, and then gone and like invested some more money. But, you know, that's what I'm here to tell you. Don't do what I did. I think the small run of patches was smart, like the original run that I did, but like, do as few as possible. Even though the amount you get like per unit is kind of crap, like, it'll save you money in the long run if you kind of figure out that something's not going to do that well. And obviously, if something's completely handmade, like on your own, you know, you're like knitting something from scratch, you know, that's easy enough to make a one-off, right? And then duplicate that. Well, it's not even easy to duplicate that, but like you can then duplicate that when someone orders a new one. I could have made way less things than I made, and I would have way less stuff now if I had taken that approach instead of the one that I did take. It's hard when you have all this stuff that didn't really sell, and even things that I really loved and I think are good, they just didn't quite work on Etsy for some reason. And I'll get into a couple of those reasons right now. You can all go into just a generally very popular category that that tends to be hard because there are so many other people making things, and you could be buried forever even if your stuff is pretty good. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of listings under some of these very basic categories. If you say birthday card, for example, there are so many on there. You know, you're never going to get found unless you do something truly unique that people are also searching for to kind of cross over with that. You can basically get lucky and happen to hit a trend, and that can work out well for you. Another big thing that I really wish I had done more of is I designed my pieces for a real life shopping experience, to be honest. I designed it for someone to see in person and react to it based on it, how it really looks in real life. That was a total mistake. I really should have built more things to read well through the one image that people are going to see when they shop an Etsy listing. That was a big mistake of mine. And there's a couple of products that I have that just didn't do well at all. And I'm pretty sure the main reason they didn't do well is they don't read well in a single small image. And there are things they could have done to help with that. You know, they have video now. They didn't really do that when I started. And, you know, there's always more images you can do, but you can't guarantee people are going to click through all of that. So really designing whatever thing you're trying to sell, like for that hero shot first image that people get when they're searching, like that's critical. And thankfully, this thing works pretty well in that context. But like other products I made, like I didn't design it with that in mind. I designed it for just fun, for playing around. And yeah, they don't read well. They don't read well. And that really hurt me because it was hard to convey like what was cool or cute or funny about it at that like small picture, quick glance, you know, it just didn't have impact in that context. And I really would have done it differently had I known that when I was really producing the bulk of the items in my shop. Yeah, while it was fun to play around and make stuff, it just, you know, like you play around and you make stuff and some stuff just, you know, it's not that good. It doesn't do that well. You win some and you lose some. And I really should have known that, but you know, you don't know what you don't know, I guess. So I think what we're gonna do is I'm gonna take you on a little tour through the hits and misses throughout my tenure. I don't even have all the things that I made anymore. Like some of the things that I've made, I completely sold out of them. And I think I'm gonna start with the things that didn't do so well and talk to you a little bit about that because I think it's important to talk about failure online so that people realize like this is normal. Not everything you make is gonna do well. And when you're an artist, maybe not everything you make needs to be made public. Perhaps I could have learned that too. You're always gonna have stuff in your shop. You're gonna have the things that are super popular. You know, it's that 80-20 principle idea, right? You're gonna have the big sellers that do really well and bring in a lot of money for you, and you're gonna have things that do okay. And not everything is gonna be this massive hit. It's pretty hard to do, and even like the greatest companies in the world, the most popular artists in the world, you always have things that are gonna be more popular than others. So that's part of it. I think it's you can know that objectively, and then when it's actually you, it's just like, no, but I can't have failures. Anyway, so Here is, I'm an outdoorsy person. I'm a big rock climber, and because, you know, the patch did well, people who also enjoy the outdoors were drawn to my shop more naturally. So, with that in mind, started making other like outdoorsy things here. So I made some climbing stuff. I made a little climbing pin as well. I will have to say, like, the climbing stuff never really did that well for me. You know, there are plenty of climbers out there and it's been getting more and more popular, but you know, it just wasn't that popular of a search term. There were other people making things that were a little more relevant to the average climber, and a lot of the stuff I was making was a little more specific to outdoor climbing. And don't get me wrong, like there are tons of people that are interested in that stuff, but I just think the overlap of like people that are interested in that and also are on Etsy and are also trying to buy a gift, and then on top of that, like thought this was funny, like that was a pretty low amount of people versus the hiking stuff. Like that just happened to hit a wider market. Like more people just generally spend time outside and like hiking than the people that want to go outdoor sport climbing. Like that's just a smaller category, you know? So, you know, like the climbing stuff didn't do as well. As you can see with a lot of these, you know, I was really trying to play around with my writing. I was trying to do little punny jokes and see what would work and see if I could be funny. Like that was another little, you know, game I was playing. And that's really what a lot of this stuff was about. And I also made like a similar thing here, like this little button, which is the same phrase that's on the sticker, and it's another like outdoor climbing thing, but that like trad climbing is even more niche. There's even less people into that, let alone people that would think that this is cute. And another like problem that I had is it just doesn't read well at this level, or as well as it should. Like I should have adjusted this design more to suit the tiny size. I was making things on Sticker Mule at the time. I do not do that anymore, which I'm not going to get into now, but those who know will probably know why. And then what I would do is I would wait for them to run their like little sales. So like they'd be like, oh, pins are on sale, like, you know, 20 pins for X amount of dollars, whatever. And that's kind of how I would do all these little tests. So I would build stuff that way and like just see what worked. And sometimes I tested designs that weren't really ready, and because I was kind of rushing to like hit those deadlines to get the cheaper price, I don't think for the most part that worked out in my favor. I did test to check sizes and stuff like that, but I really could have put in more effort to really make sure that my designs were going to translate properly when they were made. And, you know, I regret that, so don't do that. So we'll go through some other little designs that I made. I have this little guy. I was going through a keto phase around that time. I thought that joke was funny. No one else did. This guy actually did pretty well. And, you know, I think a reason that this one did better is really because it's kind of bold, it's a lot bigger. It works better on this small pin. Because it's such a bright design, it stands out well online as well. So like the problem that I was having with things just not reading well at a small scale and reading well during search, like this one did a little better for that reason. Here's another little failure. This one had no business being made into a pin for my Etsy shop. This was just a design that I made separately as I was trying to practice producing more work and producing things every day. So I made this. I think it's cute. It has no business being a pin. Like, why would anyone buy this? Like, there's no reason. So it didn't sell well. Who is surprised? I was, but I shouldn't have been. The thing that I want to show you that I actually was very surprised didn't sell that well. I mean, I've sold some for sure. It sold okay, but I thought it was gonna be like great. I thought it was so good. And you know, the internet did not agree. So this little guy right here, you know, with my Outer Sunset shop, I was making things about the outdoors and California, you know, this home I've come to really love. And I made this little design, this little pin, and I think it's super cute. And it kind of goes along with a lot of the rest of the aesthetic of things I was making at the time. I just really thought that this was going to do better, and it never really picked up steam. You know, it did okay, and I sold out of like my first like smaller test batch. So I bought more. I was like, okay, like usually I would run through a smaller amount and then I would make a larger purchase that was cheaper per unit, which is good because that's usually when I could start making a little more money off of each individual sale. So I made a bigger purchase on these and it never really picked up, which was so sad. And I have to say, like, people I've given them to as gifts, like they do like them. They are, people like them, but for whatever reason, like people on the internet didn't like that. A big part of this project was really just to explore and try things and make things I think are cute. And I wanted to test making different types of products to also just see how that would go. And one of the things I tested was like a little like notepad, little you know, sketch pad. I like this kind of stuff. I like gifting this kind of stuff. And I'd never made anything like this before, so I thought it'd be fun. And this was one of my biggest failures. So it says, this is a guilt-free sketch pad, and at the bottom it says, don't worry, be ugly. And so I needed this little encouragement for myself, and I figured that a lot of other creatives probably would feel the same way. Just like, it's okay if your stuff is ugly. Don't worry, you'll get there. I wanted that to sort of be funny and sweet and encouraging. And I'm like, you know, a little daily reminder for yourself, like to just don't stress about it. And this is really the biggest example of my failure in not thinking about how this would come off online. Like, I never really figured out how to take a great picture of this. And have it come across properly when someone would scroll through it on Etsy. This just doesn't jump off, you know, visually at all. It's so subtle, and I think the subtlety of it, like, is part of what works in real life, but it just doesn't look good online. It's too light, people can't read it, and in order to get close enough to see what I wrote, the actual cute reason someone might buy this, you couldn't see the joke very well. You couldn't really understand what the product was at a glance. It just wasn't simplified enough, and it wasn't bold enough. If I did this again, I would redesign it and make it something like, maybe I would have all that text like much, much larger. I would make it more obvious what this is. Like, literally, I'm sure like in the video right now, this just looks like white paper. And that's the problem, right? Is like, if you just are scrolling through Etsy and you think this is kind of just a white, maybe a white dot grid paper, like why would you buy that? But if you came across this in a real little like gift shop or stationery store, yeah, you might pick it up. I'm not saying it's the greatest thing out there, but like you might actually pick this up because you would see the subtler nature of it in a way that online just doesn't translate. So that was a really big failure for me because this one cost a little bit more to make the first run of, and you know, they didn't do that well, and that was sad. So we're going to talk about some other things that were generally failures for my shop, and that is all the cards that I made. So this is the first one that I ever made, and this was actually a riff on an illustration I had done for a friend for their wedding. I decided, oh, like I already kind of have this design. I wonder if I could turn it into a card. I figured, you know, people like cards on Etsy. Let's just throw it up there and see what happens. And I made that one, and then at the same time, I think I was just playing around, like trying to see if I could develop more of an illustration style, a digital illustration style. So I was playing around with that here. And again, I'm, you know, trying to play around with puns and other like cute language on that as well. So I made this one. They don't look similar, like, really at all. I started making these food-related joke drawings. I was trying to practice and, like, figure out a bit of my own style, and I made a series of cards that are all, like, from this. Now, should this be a card? Like, not really. I don't think it's that useful. Like, why would someone send this card to someone? It's kind of a sympathy card, I guess. It's just like, it's a little too lighthearted. When people are sending sympathy cards, they're usually dealing with something pretty serious. And a silly banana pun is maybe not the right thing. I didn't spend the time thinking logically about the fact that, like, why would anyone really want that? I just thought I'd throw it out there and see. And if I thought about it for 2 seconds, I would have known, like, this doesn't really make sense. This one did a lot better, which, again, makes more sense. We have our "You Are Hot" hot dog, and this is great. This is just this is an anniversary card. This is a Valentine's Day card. This has use. Like, again, think about it for 2 seconds. You know why someone would buy this. It might not be your style. That's totally fine. We have my popcorn popping off card. This one did okay, but this one again is a little more obvious of where it might get used, right? Like birthday party or celebratory something. This has more use that is a little more obvious anyway. And I think part of this problem is it's not, I had a hard time kind of finding the right search terms to get anyone to get drawn to it. I think it's a little generic. It's not quite specific enough to stand out amongst all the Etsy listings. But this last one here is probably the one that did the best. This is a celebratory or birthday card. And I think the reason this one did better was actually because, like, it's just weird enough. Like this, there's not a lot of herb-related birthday cards out there. So I think this one stood out as a better joke, and it was maybe a bit more unique than my little popcorn guy. So this one did a little better, but, I will tell you, like, none of the cards did well in general, and selling cards on Etsy is kind of a nightmare. The shipping costs are too high. People don't want to pay for that. And people also don't want to pay that much for cards. I mean that's not true. Like some cards sell really, really well. But the other problem is, like, a lot of these more expensive cards are also way more expensive to produce. Your letterpress, your like beautiful paper, your embossing or foils or all that great stuff. That really warrants like a higher price tag. These guys are nice, but they're not as fancy as, the cards that you might buy in a cute gift shop that are $5, $6, $7, like those make sense. These, in order for me to make money on them, they kind of needed to be priced that high. And even then I was really barely making anything on them. Like, I'm making a couple of dollars per sale, and I still have to like pack and ship the order. Just think about like how much I'm getting as an hourly wage if my, I'm packing and shipping all of these and I'm selling like one card. It's pretty bad hourly rate. I made the cards because I love cards. I love cards. I love writing cards and giving them to people. Like, that's just a personal, like, love of mine. They were a terrible idea as far as like getting any real profit from them and actually really supporting the business that way. You know, they're just, it's hard to sell a card for very much, and the only way to make real money is to sell by volume. The other thing I could have done is try to like license these illustrations, but I didn't really know enough about licensing at the time. I also could have invested in a lot more of my own printing setup, so I could have just tested different cards and like printed them out individually as they got ordered. That's also something I could have done. But again, investing in really high quality, a really high quality printer setup and paper and all that great stuff, that's still a lot to do. And recouping that investment probably would have taken a really long time as well. So I think had I thought through the cards a bit more, I would have known that this was never really going to pan out in a way that would help the longevity of my little shop. But you know, we live and learn, and hopefully you are learning to think really hard about this. And if you do make cards, you know, I really highly recommend like testing them, seeing how they do online, see if people like them online first. And I think the other big mistake is like whatever is going to draw someone to that card, it needs to be so obvious and like large and very clear as you're scrolling through these tiny little pictures, because that was a big mistake for me. Like I was doing with the cards, I was really just trying to work on my output in general, like just play around, make fun illustrations, see what I could come up with. And I made this little zine, and I had a few of them printed, and they are all around this idea of nature nightmares, which I think, oh no, I think I did this for October. I think that's how this one in particular came along. And I was also really getting caught up in the Instagram content, and I was feeling that intense need to make more stuff to post. So that was another reason why I was really like pushing myself to just output as much as possible. So Inktober was a really great motivator for me at the time, and I made a lot of these little what I'm calling nature nightmares, and I turned it into a zine. So like this is an example. I'm thinking about fun and funny memories that I've had while outside. The reason people were sort of drawn to, you know, my patch in the first place, like this funny, not so serious tone about loving the outdoors, even when it's kind of rough out there. And that's where a lot of those little illustrations came from. And I had fun doing it, but it was hard. It was really hard to like make that such a consistent thing throughout the month, and doing the work that was actually bringing in my rent money. This right here is another little fun sticker and illustration that I worked on. And this was one of my more recent things that I made. I think the illustration was good for me to practice, but it just didn't really translate well at this size. But I think it was a fun thing that I made within all of the like outdoorsy stuff that I made. So, you know, good to explore. But I could have executed it better, and that really matters, you know, that matters in the long-term success of products online. So that's really all of my flops, which is most of my shop, to be honest. There are some things that have done well in my shop that I'm not gonna bother showing right now, although if you go to my Instagram, like for the Outer Sunset, you could see like all my old products, like they're on there. But when I would sell out of things, sometimes I would just let it go and not make more, because they did well but not well enough. But with the patch, you know, that was a big hit and people were excited about it. And in a lot of ways, it really kind of went like low-key viral online. So I started making other variations on that same design. So I made this little sticker. I wanted each version of this piece to be unique. I wanted them to be cohesive. I wanted them to work in different formats. And I wanted them to all kind of feel like they came from the same person and the same shop. This is the shape that is a more classic, embroidered patch shape. The sticker didn't have that same logic behind it. It's not an embroidered patch. It can be any shape. And I wanted something that felt different, but also cohesive with those two. And as I started expanding into some other things, I made magnets, which I don't make anymore. I got rid of those. That had a little unique like diamond shape to it. As I started making these other offshoots of this main hiking design, my shop did start picking up steam, and it started doing well in the Etsy algorithm. I started doing very well under a few key tags, which was great. My shop's selling a lot, like I'm selling a lot of patches, and that was awesome because I just started having a little bit more money coming in to then support making other things, investing in other parts of my little Etsy business, and that was really exciting. And seeing people like get excited about the patch and messaging me about how much their friend liked it, like that was so cool. I loved that. But here's where we get into some of the problems and the downsides. As my patch really started getting more popular, and doing well in the Etsy algorithm, it started getting noticed by other people, which is when other people started ripping me off, which is like, in some ways, the fact that there are people that copied my work is like flattering in a sense where, you had something that people like so much that other people are either inspired by it or, think that it's so popular and high selling that they want to enjoy some of those profits for themselves. And at this point, I had started to get people copying me both on this site and some other sites as well. And that was kind of frustrating. And I spent some time trying to fight it. Like, a lot of these sites, they don't have any real protections for artists with people stealing. You kind of have to go do it all yourself. Like, you have to both find these people and then often like either fill out a bunch of forms saying like, hey, Etsy or, whoever, like, this is stolen, this is my work, like, this is very clearly a ripoff, blah, 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 like, I'm asking you to take it down. You have to do all that work yourself. On Etsy, I spent most of my time having to message people directly. A lot of times the people that had taken it were running these shops where they like scour Etsy, they look for the best performers, they pay someone, now they're going to use AI, but at the time they would like pay someone on Fiverr to rip it off, and then they just populated their shops with hundreds and hundreds of like stolen artwork that they would do like direct to print. So they didn't print any of it themselves. Like on the back end, they would send it off to get printed by another company. So doing very little work themselves. And they would just have hundreds and hundreds of stickers. So you could tell these shops were just stealing everything because there was no cohesion amongst the type of stuff that they would have on there. It was just literally anything, anything that performed well, they would take it. So mine obviously got grabbed by these at some point. So those people were sometimes a little easier to fight. They didn't even really know what was going on in their shops half the time, so they would just take it down so they didn't have to fuss with you. I had other people get kind of mad at me, which was unfortunate, or get like defensive. I do think some of the time people didn't realize they were taking from me. They maybe were taking from someone who took from me. And to be fair, like there's a point in with any form of artwork, you know, you're allowed to get inspired by things and you're allowed to make something that is different enough. If your work is like too close to the original thing, like, and you try to sell that and make money off of that, like that's not gonna work. Like you get in trouble for that. But if you change it and modify it and really make it your own, if you take, you know, my wording and then you make something entirely different out of it, like, yeah, that's basically fair game. That was kind of frustrating, especially when I saw people, you know, using my language or they would slightly reword it and it was not as good. And then some of the art was pretty bad. Now you definitely see a lot of AI art around it. I know some of these people have made money off of this, and at a certain point, you know, I just decided I didn't want to spend all my time trying to hunt people down. And it made me really sad, like just asking people not to take my work. And I just could have spent a lot of time doing that. And I didn't want to waste my time just emailing and filling out forms, trying to get people to stop doing this when the wave would just never, the wave will never stop. Like it will just keep coming. If you are on any like big search platform for like art stuff, you know, Etsy or like Redbubble or, you know, any of those types of places, like if your work does well, you will never stop having this problem. Like people will just keep coming for you to rip you off. You can, you know, try and swat them all down and new ones are gonna pop right back up. So I decided not to fight it as much. And I just didn't want to spend my time doing that. I wanted to make more stuff. I wanted to, you know, send out my orders and like do all of that well alongside the other jobs I was juggling at the time. And I just was like, you know what, like I'm just not going to put the effort in here. I had customers that would often like alert me of this stuff and they were all really sweet and really looking out for me. So I think most people out there were good and thoughtful consumers, and they kind of knew like who the real one was and who the ripoffs were. I really am thankful for the customers that reached out and tried to help me with all that stuff. Like that was so kind, and I certainly didn't have to do that. As I was thinking a lot about, you know, people kind of ripping me off and trying to make these like stickers that were just almost direct copies of my work, I tried to think about like what can I make that someone who's lazy, who wants to just steal ideas and put in no effort and make money, like all they're trying to do is make as much money as possible with as little work as possible. How can I possibly improve the sales on my shop like in a way that they could not replicate, or they would have a very, very hard time replicating? And so that's when I decided to make this little guy. I am a big fan of enamel pins. I love these things. I have way too many and I like giving them to people as well. And I don't know if I'd had people asking for them at this point, but occasionally I would have people say like, oh, I love the patch. Like I want a pin to put on my hat or something like that. But like, don't they kind of start to work together? You know, we've got this like cohesive color theme going on. This was really my like next challenge, was how can I make something that someone who's trying to rip me off would have a hard time doing, and selling an enamel pin would be a pain in the butt. Making like a real tangible pin, you know, that's way too much effort for them. It's not that hard to make a pin or anything, but like I had more experience, same with the patch, taking an idea, like a flat design, and turning it into a physical item that actually looks good. That actually takes more technical knowledge, and I have spent some time like making flat designs into real physical objects, you know, real tangible objects, things that are printed, things that are embroidered, you know, things that are produced. You know, I knew that I could do that. I've done it before. I've done it for clients and things like that. So I figured, you know, stickers are easy. Physical, tangible goods are not so easy. So if I went in that route, I could still have my own customer base. It would be much harder for people to kind of take that customer base away from me if you didn't want to put in the work, you know? One of my favorites, my pride and joy, was my hats. This guy took a long time to do. People had been asking for it or something like this. They wanted something to wear, but this took a long time both to get the design correct, I was testing colors of hats, to get the right color of hat, trying to find a hat that was good enough quality, but not so expensive that I could actually sell it at a reasonable price. So that took a long time to figure all that out. And then getting the embroidery to work. Actually, this embroidery is a little messed up, to be honest. So I have sold out of these. I don't have these anymore outside of a handful that I'm keeping for myself. And most of them have errors. They all have something wrong with them. But it took me a really long time to make these. And I'm really happy with how they came out. They were great. People really loved these. These sold very well. It was so cute seeing people take pictures with their friends of these on trips. I really loved that. But this was a huge risk for me, even though I knew the design would probably work and it would probably be a hit. It cost me a ton of money to put the money down to get these produced. When you make something like this, when you make a physical thing, you have to do a minimum order. And, I was paying for the hats, I was paying for the embroidery work to be done, and I was paying for shipping. And the shipping on something like this is a lot more than on something like this. A lot of my profit in the business went into the first order of these. And that was definitely really scary to make that leap. And in order to kind of grow the business in a different way, I desperately wanted to be sold in real shops. I wanted people to encounter my work out in the world in real gift shops. And so I signed up for the wholesaling site Faire. And with this whole shop, I wanted everything to be an experiment. I just wanted to see what would happen. And I really wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. So having my stuff in shops was just a cool, exciting goal for me. And that did well in a lot of ways. The problem with doing well wholesaling is you really have to make sure the numbers work. Over the course of my time selling on Faire, they started raising prices on certain fees. And when you sell something as inexpensive as a patch on wholesale, I'm selling it for even less than I sell it on Etsy, so that other shops can buy it and then they can make a profit when they sell it in their shops. That's just how wholesale works, and that's fine. But the reality is when I'm selling this for even less, it's my profit is quite low per unit. And I really need to sell a very high volume wholesale wise in order to make it work. And the longer I was on Faire, and the fact that they were raising different prices and they were just really, really encouraging you to sell everything as low as possible so that they can get more fees and everything, the numbers just weren't working for me there. I was making a little bit of money, but I don't know, man. It just the cost of everything, the hats themselves were not that cheap to produce per unit, and the hats did really, really well on Faire. People in different shops that were buying them from me, they loved it, their customers loved it, but I couldn't make it work. The money I was getting out of it was just not that much, and it just became clear to me that this wasn't gonna work. That a person like me, a small shop like me, at least the knowledge that I have, the current situation that I'm in, it just wasn't gonna work. Now, part of the problem with all that is these big retailers that can make a hat like that at massive scale. They can get the cost per unit way down in a way that I cannot do. I cannot be sure that I will sell that high a volume, and I can't throw, thousands and thousands of dollars into a large run and be sure that I will make money off of it. You know, I might make money off of it, but it might take me a really, really long time to recoup those costs. And I just can't take that risk as a tiny one-person operation in a way that a much larger company can do. And because they're working with certain manufacturers and certain groups at a much bigger scale, they can also hash out better deals to get these things made even cheaper than I can do. Because so many things are made that way, and the fact that I really can't do that, a regular person buying from Amazon or Target or whatever, they don't know that. They're not thinking about that. So when they come to my shop, if I price it in a way that actually was like made me just like a reasonable amount of profit, they're gonna like laugh in my face, be like, what do you mean this hat costs like $50 or whatever? Like, I can buy a baseball cap for $12 or $15. Like, I can buy that for so cheap these other places. Why would I ever pay this much for your hat? And that is just the consumer mindset that we're in right now because of the way people shop online. And, you know, in some ways, like, yeah, it's good that people can buy hats for cheaper, like, sure. But it just means that people don't see a tiny shop like mine too much differently than they see buying a hat on Amazon. They really kind of see it as like a hat is a hat. A hat should cost X amount of dollars. And that was just something I couldn't compete against anymore. And it became especially clear in the wholesaling game that just was like not gonna work for me. So as far as like the story of the success, a lot of it really revolves around, you know, one of my few very good ideas and then good execution in making, you know, variations on that idea, which is not uncommon for a lot of businesses, actually, to be honest. But with that in mind, you know, I was doing a lot of other things at the time, and this business was doing well. I was busy, I was selling a lot of orders, and that was great. But I had a lot of other things going on. I had other clients, I had other work. I was working probably too much, and I didn't have the motivation to continue to keep up with the Etsy algorithm. And that stuff changes, you know, there's other things that they want you to do. They have other things they just need to do on the back end, and they change things, and at certain points that started to hurt my sales, and it wasn't hurting them so bad. I still had enough sales that I didn't put the work in to like help myself in the algorithm. Like, that definitely hurt me in the long run. And on top of that, I could see that people that had really successful shops were really pushing themselves in social media. They were making a lot of marketing content and doing all this stuff online, and I had a really hard time doing that. I never really got good at the social media game. It's a hard thing to do, and it takes a lot of time on top of everything else. And I think that people who are good at it are truly talented, you know? It takes a lot to make all of that, make good content, and then on top of that, actually make good products that people like and want to buy from you. I had a hard time figuring out how to be like, buy this thing, you know, making a cute little video about my product. I experimented with it, but I never got good, and that really is a big part of how people do better in the long run. They get that marketing side buttoned up, you know, and I didn't know how to sell these products in a way that felt authentic to me, that didn't feel weird and scammy. I am someone who's very, very mindful about the things that I buy, and I have a lot of anti-consumerist tendencies, and that was really starting to bother me as well with this business. I don't think it's bad to buy things all the time, and I don't think it's bad to give gifts, and that's a huge thing that I get joy out of. That's a big part of like the through line of everything I made. And so many of my customers bought the things in my shop to give to other people. But at the same time, you know, the fact that people were buying so much stuff online, and do they really need anything in my shop? You know, not really. And I just had a hard time making peace with that. You know, that part of it was my shop was starting to lose steam in the algorithm. I wasn't willing to put in the work to fix that problem. That's on me. I was having more trouble with shipping. Shipping costs were going up for me for various reasons. Other aspects of my life were changing in a way where keeping up the shop and shipping things out was becoming like more difficult, more tedious. And yeah, I wasn't feeling that great about selling stuff to people that they didn't really need. I knew that if my shop was going to thrive in the long run, you know, I would need to like grow the marketing side and encourage people to buy my stuff more. And I didn't want to do that. It just felt kind of gross to me. And I don't shame anyone for doing that. You know, I don't think it's bad to have an Etsy shop. I don't think it's bad to make art. But there's just such a hyper consumerism, overconsumption problem. And I just didn't feel good about being a part of that anymore. So that's another reason why I really started to not put the effort in to keep the shop going. I think that my little patch, you know, it had its heyday on Etsy, and you know, someone who's bought this patch is not necessarily going to come back and buy 20 more. You know, that doesn't necessarily make sense, and that's fine. And other goods are going to pop up, and other things are going to become more popular. There's going to be little cycles of trends of things that are the cool and funny, cute hiking gift to buy your friends. And I think my time had kind of passed at that point. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm still selling, and I'm still selling fine, but I certainly was selling more before. And some of that, you know, a lot of that is really my fault. I didn't keep up with the algorithm. I didn't do some of the things that Etsy wanted me to do. I started getting frustrated with Etsy as well. Etsy was doing a lot of the same things that, you know, places like Faire were doing. They were upping their fees. They want you to ship as fast as possible, to sell for as cheap as possible, and they want you to have free shipping. Etsy really pushes any seller, but it's especially hard when you're like a little one-person operation. They want you to sell everything as cheaply and quickly as possible, and they want you to respond to messages within 24 hours. They want you to have like perfect customer service, and they do things on the back end to punish you if you don't do these things. So if you slip up in any way, you can get hurt in the algorithm of getting your stuff shown. And on top of that, if you like take a break or put your shop on vacation, they would punish you for that as well. And you would have a harder time like showing up in the algorithm when you came back. I don't have a ton of data on this, but that was definitely my experience. I think it's a little better now. I don't think I'm getting punished quite so heavily when I put the shop on vacation now, but it definitely was a thing a few years ago. It really hurt me a few times when I had to put the shop on hold for various reasons, and then I just wouldn't get any sales for like a really long time after I put it back up. So there were aspects of the changing Etsy algorithm. They're expecting more and more from sellers. And then on top of that, with all the people who are sort of like ripping me off, the fact that they didn't really support you in any way with any of that, and the fact that they had so many sellers on Etsy that are people reselling things off of Amazon, Alibaba, like now Temu, people that are stealing and doing direct to print sales. There are so many people on Etsy that are not these little one-person shops of artists making real stuff. There are tons of people who are like that, and it just stinks that like they're all getting drowned out by people. They're reselling cheap garbage off of other sites, and people come to Etsy because they want that experience of working with like a little one-person shop or a small family shop, people making handmade goods, people designing these little special things. They want to buy from Etsy because they want that. They're trying to get away from the Amazon experience, the Walmart experience, buying from these big mass market sellers. But the truth is, like, Etsy doesn't want that. Etsy wants to secretly be Amazon, and they want to trick you into thinking you're buying from a little seller. And in reality, they don't care at all that there's all of these people selling Temu stuff to you instead and pretending that it's handmade. They make you say, like, I did this, I actually made this myself, or I didn't, or whatever. But think about it. People that are reselling stuff off of Amazon on Etsy for a markup, they're gonna lie. They're not gonna say, like, oh yeah, like, I definitely didn't make this. Like, they're not gonna do that, So it just became really clear to me that the quality of the stuff on Etsy was going down. And I'm sure with AI art, it's getting even worse. I think it's harder in a lot of ways to get found. There's a lot more garbage on there, and it's even easier to make garbage to put on there. And there's even more stuff to resell. And it makes me really sad about what it used to be when people went on there and they could find all these really cute and cool vintage things and handmade things and custom things that you couldn't find on every other site. That's just not true anymore. Etsy's ever so slightly more handmade, but it's basically just Amazon at this point. And I don't really want to be a part of that anymore. Like, that's just a thing I don't feel good about. And I hate that customers are kind of getting this fake experience. They're kind of getting scammed, and I don't want to be part of that. It really just led to me not really wanting to like spend my creative energy in this way anymore. I didn't put in the work. I didn't improve the shop. I kind of sat back and let it decline slowly. And that's on me. That's definitely my fault. And I don't want to downplay that at all, because I think it can be easy to kind of sit there and be like, oh, the system, I'm not doing well because Etsy is bad. But, a lot of this is really my fault of how things wound up. I've talked about that I put money into things that didn't really sell. I didn't put the effort in to make my listings good enough. I kind of let it go on autopilot, and that's on me. That's on me. And I got bored. I got bored of this project. That's part of it as well. I think there's also just something about packing and shipping orders for 4 years that wears you down a little bit. It just started to feel like it was time to close this chapter. And the last thing is just, I have some other life changes that have come up more recently, and they're really exciting. I can't wait to like make videos about it, to be honest. But yeah, there's other reasons why I really needed to shut the shop down. It just wasn't gonna make any sense to keep this going. That's really like the rise and fall of my Etsy shop. And if for some reason you want to support the shop or you want to take a look at it, I will have it up for probably 2 more weeks. There's about 2 more weeks where that thing will be around. So if you want to take a look at it and see, just look at my art, like, please do. Instagram will be up. My Instagram handle is the Outer Sunset Co. I will write all that stuff down in the description box. So if that interests you, feel free to take a look around. I want to give advice to the people that are thinking about starting their own shop or have just started their own shop and are trying to figure out how to improve it and get it off the ground and get some traction. I think the biggest thing I've learned is think about how your products are going to present within the context of the algorithm and the way people search. Think about that first. And then the biggest other thing I can really suggest is make something that's really good and unique. And this sounds so obvious, like make something good. But the reality is, like, if you have a really great idea, if you have something that your friends think is cool and fun, and they just genuinely start asking for you to buy it, it will do well on Etsy. That's what happened with my patch. You know, I made the patch and people in my life actually just genuinely liked it. And it also worked on Etsy. That is a really good rule of thumb to think about. It feels like bad advice to just say, like, make something really good, but that's actually the truth here. You know, you need to make something really good, and that takes real effort. And I think that's another problem that people have when they start Etsy, and I certainly had a problem with that. You know, I just made whatever I wanted and I didn't think that much about the customer. I did sometimes and I did other times, and you know, my effort really ebbed and flowed depending on how I was feeling at the time. And if you want Etsy to be successful and you really want this to be a good portion or all of your income, you can't take that approach. You have to be very serious, and you really need to like test and think a lot about how are the customers going to think about this? How are the people who are looking to buy, how are they going to think about it? How are they going to view all of this within the context of the site? And the other thing you need to keep in mind is that what can I actually sell at a reasonable profit? And that was a big problem with a lot of a lot of the things that I sold, is they're all pretty inexpensive. So the more fees were kind of chipping away at that price, you know, the less and less I'm making per each sale. And, you know, there just wasn't enough longevity in that. So I just advise you to maybe make some things that have a little bit better profit cushion in between the cost and the sale price. Keep those things in mind when you're coming up with products, and you know, make your best art, deliver that handmade custom experience as much as you can, because I do think with all of the AI AI stuff and all of the like low effort art that's going to be out there, I think there is opportunity for artists to really lean into this human handmade experience that might be a little harder to replicate. And especially like I talked about with the pins, you know, like that is something that's hard for people to make when they're doing the lowest lift possible. So you as a real artist, a real person, can make a real tangible thing more easily, and you can make something more special than someone who's just sort of poking around on Midjourney can make. So that's my advice to you. Like, really think about how the customer is searching. Think about having enough profit margin to actually make this viable in the long run. Test your stuff. Really check with people in your life and see if they actually really want to buy the things you're making. Lean into physical, tangible, real stuff, because that's going to be harder for people to do and make. So that is my advice. That is my parting advice for those trying to go on this journey. If you are someone starting out, I want to hear from you. I want more people to be successful. And I'd love to see Etsy change and become a real place for artists again like this. I would love to see that change. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think they care. But if you're willing to dive into that world and you want to get some traction and even just kind of get some confidence about being able to really sell things, I think Etsy can be good for like building and getting that confidence. So if you're someone who's starting out your own shop, either you've just started it or you're thinking about starting it, like, please let me know. I'd love to see it. Even though I'm a little pessimistic about all this stuff, like, I want people to get out there and try, and I want there to be more art in the world and more creative work in the world. We still need those things, and I really want to encourage people to do that. So I hope that this was helpful to you if you are one of those people. And if you're not someone who's in the Etsy art space or someone trying to make art online, if you're just someone who's out here kind of buying or shopping this way, I really want you to think, maybe spend a little more time looking at those listings and looking at the seller, and maybe make sure that you're not buying from someone who's stealing from other people if you can. Try and look for those real little sellers out there, because they're working hard and they often have more high quality stuff than a lot of these shops that are just reselling. And the other thing is you're getting scammed. The people that are reselling, you might as well just buy that stuff from the original seller and save some money instead of buying the upcharged version on Etsy. So, maybe do a little bit more digging if you can when you're shopping this way. I really would like to encourage that, because both the real artists will appreciate you, and I think it would be nice if the resellers could be gently encouraged to stop doing that. So at least, go buy the original cheaper one instead of the upmarked one. I really would like to encourage that as well. Etsy will not stop doing this, and Etsy won't crack down on these resellers and the people stealing until the customers demand it. So I'm really looking to you to help. So please, if you care about this type of stuff getting made and continuing to get made, if you can spend a couple extra minutes while you're shopping, looking for that stuff, please do it. People like me out there and the future people making these shops will appreciate you for that. So I hope you enjoyed my story about my Etsy shop. I also just wanted to sort of make a little proper send-off for my shop. So yeah, we've got about 2 more weeks and I'm closing this thing up. I don't regret it at all. I think it was a great thing for me to do, but this chapter is closing. So hopefully there will be more new exciting things to come, and that desire to make stuff doesn't go away, so I will be making other things. I hope you learned something, and I really appreciate you watching this. Please let me know what you think of anything I said, to be honest. I'm really curious what other people think about Etsy right now, and think about sort of online little mom and pop artist shops. I want to know what you think. I really appreciate you hanging out with me, and I will talk to you again soon. Goodbye.